Good Shabbos, everybody. So you realize that after blessing the incoming new month of Shvat, which is going to be on Thursday, that means it's only 2 weeks to spring. Tu b'Shvat. Isn't that what Tu b'Shvat? Tu b'Shvat higiya, chag la'ilanot, Tu b'Shvat higiya. Isn't it? That's when we're told Hashkedia parachat, when the almonds blooms in Israel, which is the intro to the spring. Maybe not here in Canada, but certainly in Israel. Okay. A tale is told about twins who were born into a poor couple in a small village. And even though the midwife had tied a thread around the wrist of the firstborn, in the confusion of the delivery, the thread had come off, and now no one knew which boy was the elder. And after fretting about the situation for a few days, the father finally decided to call them both by the name Twin. And thus, the two boys grew up, and as luck would have it, they were identical twins, and no one could tell them apart. The twins lived together with their father until their 16th birthday, and whereupon they decided to leave. They traveled a few days until they came upon a village where they were hired by a local farmer. "What are your names?" the farmer asked. "Twin," they replied in unison. "Twins indeed. Just looking at you, one can tell that. But what are your given names?" "Twin is the only name either of us has ever had," replied one of the brothers. "But how," questioned the farmer, "how do people tell you apart?" To their answer was, "Why should anyone want to tell us apart?" "But you're two separate people," said the farmer. "How am I supposed to know which one of you is working in the pasture and which one of you is feeding the chickens?" The reply was, "You don't have to know. Just tell us what you want done and we'll do it. And if we're doing something wrong, just tell whichever one you see and it'll be fixed." And like the boy's father, who before him couldn't make a decision, he gave up trying and decided Twin would continue to be their name. And thus, he would yell out, "Twin," and one of them would show up and ready to listen and do whatever the order was. Things went along this way very well for a few months, until the farmer's daughter, Rebecca, returned home from a break with her aunt. She'd been staying there for the last few months, and it was time to come home. She was about the same age as the twins and began to spend a lot of time with them. In a short while, she became the first person since their mother who was able to tell them apart. She was undoubtedly aided in this ability by the fact that she had fallen in love with one of them, a love that was reciprocated. "Twin," she said one afternoon to the object of her affections, "I can't begin to tell you how much it bothers me that you and your brother have the same name. You are very different, but I think that the three of us are the only ones in the whole village who know that. I have no way of talking about you so that people know that I'm talking about you and not your twin." "What would you have me do, Rebecca?" the twin answered. "Twin is my name. It's who I am." "It's not your name," she replied with frustration. "It's just a label that a grief-stricken and bitter old man put on you and your brother at birth." "You're right, Rebecca, but you're also wrong. For him it might have been a label, but for me, it's my identity. I'm called Twin because I am a twin." "I know you're a twin," she said, "but what do I call you when I want you to be a lover, a husband, a father to my children? What do I call you when I want you to be that special you that I have fallen in love with? Rebekah's twin had thus, at that moment, come to a turning point in his life. He can no longer just live with his identity as a twin, but now needed a name. And that was exactly the same problem that Moses faced in his initial encounters with God. Think about it. When you meet somebody for the first time, what is usually the first thing you say? Hi, I am Alan. What is your name? What should I call you? Right? I mean, that's what we do. But God never had been asked that question before. Which is why at the burning bush, God answered like twin, not with a name, but with his identity. God responded, Eheyeh asher eheyeh, which is usually translated as, I am what I am, or I will be what I will be. Whenever I come across that phrase, I'm reminded of, there's a song in the musical La Cage aux Folles, or actually, I once saw, many years ago, I saw an episode of Star Trek, which was one of the few times that Joan Collins, remember Joan Collins? Put your hand up if you remember Joan Collins. Now you're showing your age, yeah. I remember Joan Collins. She actually starred in it. It was The City on the Edge of Forever. Now, in the episode, Kirk and Spock encountered a time portal, and when they asked the gatekeeper who and what it was, it replied in a booming voice, I am what I am. And that scene sort of always reminded me of God. But that really doesn't matter. It doesn't answer Moses' question. But God, what should I call you? So God tries to answer Moses. He says, I am the God of your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But again, is that God's name, or is that merely his identity? Is God just another way of saying twin? Perhaps God was satisfied with the identity of himself. But Moses, like Rebekah in our story, wasn't. After all, if Moses was speaking face to face with God, he wasn't sure what to call him. And how can we, thousands of years later, with no direct contact with God, know what to call him either? How are we supposed to serve God if we don't know what to call God? And how can we truly talk to God, talk about God, or develop relationships with him if we don't even know what to call him either? But God got the hint. He understood that he needed to have a name if he was to develop a relationship with not only Moses, but with the children of Israel, his chosen people. And that is why at the beginning of our parasha this morning, God again appeared to Moses and said, I am God. That is my identity. I appeared to your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, under the name El Shaddai. But they didn't know my name. I will tell you my name. My name is Adonai, Lord. That is what you should call me from now on. And that is how I will appear to you. That is how I will speak to you, and you will speak to me. And it is by that name that I will redeem my people from slavery in Egypt. Now, unlike twin, God now has revealed, he has a revealed name to go along with his unique identity. A name and identity by which we have been calling God ever since, for thousands of years. Now, this is all very well and good, but I wanted to consider something else. In the words of William Shakespeare, a God by any other name is still God. So what's in a name anyway? Does it really matter by what name we call God, as long as we recognize his identity and the attributes that make him God? And the answer is that it does. And God understood this. And so God told Moses that the name that Abraham called him isn't going to be the same as the name that Moses will call him. Times have changed. People's needs have changed. And God realized that he must change. He must change his name in order to be effective, relevant, and believable. And I might add, like Twin in our story, loved as well. Which brings us to today. Looking back at all the names that we have for God. By the way, does anybody know how many names we have for God? Just throw it out there. Anybody know? We have 49 names for God. Lists of them. Okay. All have different attributes that we attribute to God. They were given to them, they were given by the rabbis over many years. And that is why instead of wondering, as did Moses, what to call God, we should call upon God by any name that we feel comfortable using. It is why our tradition says that God has 72 names, enough names to use depending on our needs. For example, Elohim, God of creation, is also the God of judgment. Adonai, the God that appeared to Moses, is also the God of mercy. El Shaddai, the name used by the patriarchs, was according to tradition the attribute for nurturing. Do we actually need a God of mercy or compassion? If so, then use Adonai. A God of nurturing, El Shaddai. Anger, judge of vengeance, a judgment of vengeance, Elohim. Or any of the whole host of other names that we have for God, including the ineffable name only used by the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, on Yom Kippur. And this is not to mention the common names that we refer to God by today, such as Lord, such as Almighty, Master of the Universe, Ribbono Shel Olam, Kadosh Baruch Hu, and even Hashem. Now, the reason that we have these many names for God is very simple. To impress upon us that God is always there for us and should always be called on, no matter what condition or mood we find ourselves in. Yes, in Judaism, we are permitted to be angry with God. We are permitted to question God. We are permitted to even say, I don't agree with you. I don't want to have anything to do with you, God. Those are true emotions. Those are emotions of a true relationship. Unlike other religions where you're not allowed to do that. Okay? We, human beings, are the ones who needed to give God a name and not just an identity. And remember, when we did and when we called out to him, God did indeed listen to us and respond to us. That's different than demanding something from God or asking something for God and you automatically think you're entitled to get what you ask for. It's a whole different concept. It's not true. Responded to us when he redeemed us from slavery, just as he had promised. So may we continue to have the faith to know that God, by whatever name we choose to call him, is still with us, is still listening to us, and will still fulfill the promises that he made to us. But only if, like Moses, we still call upon him and acknowledge him, not just when things are bad, not just when we see the supernatural, but all the time, anytime, even when we don't want to. Shabbat Shalom.